It's finally here, Assassin's Creed Shadows, and man, it took a while, didn't it? I remember back when it was first announced as Assassin's Creed Red, which feels like forever ago now. And there were a couple delays, but it's here now. I've played through a major portion of it, about 30 hours in. I usually like to finish games completely before I review them, but with a game as large as these open world RPG style Assassin's Creed games, that's just not feasible. My review would be out in like 2 months. I like doing everything it's got to offer. Every treasure chest, get every viewpoint, every side mission. Takes forever. In this review, I'm just going to talk about my experience with the game and answer the question, is it the ultimate evolution of Assassin's Creed, or a major disappointment? Before I begin, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, INTOTHEAM. Now, your clothing should say something about you. Express your personality, your overall vibe. I like my clothing bright, I like it colorful, creative, something that stands out, not just boring plaid squares on a basic button-up that's going to net you approximately 0 compliments out in public. Since 2012, INTOTHEAM has been nailing that unique look and feel with premium apparel, covered in really cool designs that half my wardrobe consists of, and yours should too. Their shirts, they're buttery soft, they're shrink resistant. I've worn and washed them 1,000 times, including the one I'm wearing in this video, and they're holding up really well still. The graphics are still bright and vibrant, they're not all cracked. And I get questions all the time asking where I get these. One of the most important factors to me are how thin and breathable these shirts are. They're not those cheap cotton ones that make you itch around the neck and feel really heavy when it's hot outside. What you're seeing here is just a small taste of what they offer. And right now they even have up to 70% off graphic tees starting at $9 on top of the 10% discount you get with my code. Even without sales, they have really good deals. To use my discount, click on the link in the description of this video. Not only do you get some great clothing and a discount by supporting INTOTHEAM, it also goes a long way in supporting this channel and its content. And of course, my Patreon members are going to get a big shout out too. Your continued support keeps these videos flowing, and if you'd like to have your name up here too, you get sneak peeks, progress updates, early access to my videos. Go to patreon.com/GamerThumbTV or click the link in the description to get started. To start this review, I'd like to get some basic housekeeping out of the way. Unfortunately, these points need to be addressed, so let's knock it right out at the beginning. Yes, Ubisoft did provide me a copy of the game much earlier for review purposes. They didn't pay me, they didn't tell me what to say, other than some very basic guidelines to stay away from major story spoilers. Although this review will have some very light story spoilers, having said that, receiving a review copy won't affect my opinion on the game. Never does. That all comes down to the trust between a creator and their audience. And if you've been here for a while, you know me pretty well. If you're new here, all my opinions are my own, and welcome. And the last thing, I know there's been a huge discourse on the internet around Yasuke. Was he a samurai in real life? Is this historically accurate? Is it disrespectful to this and that? Here's my take. I don't care. This is not a history lesson, it's a video game. So if that's the conversation you're looking for, it's not the video for you. At the beginning of this and almost every Assassin's Creed game, it tells you it's a video game inspired by history. It's all fake and we took creative liberties. You can pause right here and read the disclaimer if you want. For me, the argument starts and ends right here. And that's the last I'll say in the matter. I'm here to review a game, not argue history. Okay, Assassin's Creed Shadows. The best way to start a review like this is to describe my history with Assassin's Creed. I have been there since day one on Xbox 360 when we first put on the hooded robes of Altair in the original game, and I've kept up with every single game in the series. Yes, it's had its ups, it's had its somewhere in betweens, and it's had its downs. My favorites in the series include Brotherhood 3, Black Flag is all the way at the top for me. Origins is also another peak of the series. Odyssey, Valhalla, and Mirage were good, but never quite reached those levels of greatness from before. So where does Shadows fit? I'm going to go as far as saying that this is the best Assassin's Creed game since Black Flag. I think Black Flag's always going to remain being my favorite. It's too good. But Ubisoft genuinely brought their A game to Shadows. They pulled out all the stops. It just spews of the passion that was put into the project. And setting this Assassin's Creed in Japan could have been a huge gamble, considering that Ghost of Tsushima already beat them to it. And this could have ended up being a Tsushima clone, and it's just not. Of course, there are some similarities, considering that they also take place in Japan. You got samurai swords, sub-weapons, but then again, Tsushima did feel like Assassin's Creed at some points also, so there's a little borrowing from each other. Shadows really has its own identity that merges everything the series has learned from gameplay standard up to this point. This is where everything from the beginning of the series to now has led. After Assassin's Creed Origins, the series evolved into more of an open-world RPG versus the classic Assassin's Creed style. With Odyssey, then Valhalla, the series started moving away from the classic Assassin vs. Templar story. Odyssey takes place way before the Assassin Brotherhood even existed. There's no Templars, there's no Assassins, it's just not a thing yet. In Valhalla, the Assassins exist, but Eivor, who you play as, isn't even one of them. So, understandably, longtime fans wanted to go back to more classic elements. And with Assassin's Creed Mirage, they did just that. The enormous open world was scaled back to a much smaller experience, filled with stealthy assassin segments. It felt more like the first game. But I always felt that it took it too far with Mirage. Personally, I like the ones where you could sink hundreds of hours into, while still feeling like an Assassin's Creed game. Now, with this next part, I'm going to dive into the story, and I do have to venture slightly into spoiler territory, into how these characters fit into the conflict and the series, but I'll keep the big plot points out. There's a lot of big twists and turns that are best left experienced. Shadows does take place almost 60 years after the death of Ezio Auditore. Japan's in a state of chaos, with warlord Nobunaga Oda attempting to unify Japan through military conquest. But in doing so, some see him as a hero, some see him as a tyrant. During this process, the region of Iga, where people live that train as shinobi, fought off Nobunaga's son after he decided, I'm going to attack these people. Then Oda Nobunaga decides, I don't know why my idiot son did this, now I have to wipe them out, I was going to leave them alone. And two main characters take center stage. Naue is a young shinobi girl lived in the village with her father. Once it gets attacked and destroyed, he dies and she's fueled by vengeance. She's laser focused and filled with rage, just slaughtering the mystery group that killed her father. And she learns that he had many secrets that she didn't know about. And she knows very little about her mother. Again, some light story spoilers here, so if you don't want to know anything, jump ahead a couple minutes in the video. She carries her father's hidden blade, but she has no clue what it really is. Doesn't know where it came from, doesn't know what it represents. As it turns out, her mother belonged to the Assassin Brotherhood. The Assassins came to Japan after a Spanish assassin was thrown out of the Brotherhood for breaking the creed. But he believed in their mission so much that he partnered with others to expand it to Japan. And ultimately, this branch of assassins were almost wiped out after they were defending these powerful artifacts that Naue is looking for now. So while she's wiping out her father's killers, she's also learning more about the assassins and putting them back together again. Now, Shadows does retcon a bit of the established lore we previously had during this era in Japan with the assassins. For example, there was already an assassin that killed Oda Nobunaga and took a Sword of Eden from him. None of that happens here. It's erased. But to be fair, it's never been covered in a mainline Assassin's Creed game, so it doesn't really matter, and the game sort of hand waves this away by establishing that the memories in the Animus could be corrupted and changed, and we're, as the player, being shown the true ones that we're uncovering. And Yasuke, he came to Japan under a different name, and he spent his entire life being taken from land to land, being traded as a slave. He's a man that suffers from nightmares of his past, and finally finds freedom when he's brought to Japan with Jesuit priests. Oda Nobunaga has never seen someone of his skin color before, so he takes an interest in him. And Yasuke stays as his guest and tries adapting their culture, where he struggles to learn their combat, their lifestyle, but eventually begins succeeding much to the amazement of Nobunaga. So Nobunaga makes him one of his samurai and most trusted confidants. And since Yasuke was under the ownership of priests in the past, he does have a link to the Templars. Remember, the Templars were heavily embedded at the church at this point in the series. They infiltrated their way in and spread throughout it. He's seen an assassin blade before and was told to find a girl with the blade for answers, and when he sees that Naue has one, he sets out on his own mission to join her and seek the answers he's looking for by following the hidden blade. Where Assassin's Creed Shadow truly excels at is its character development. Naue and Yasuke have a complicated relationship. She's bent on revenge for anyone that had anything to do with the slaughter of her village, and Yasuke, he was present during that battle. She absolutely hates him at first.
Forgive me.
Forgive you. Forgive? You killed my neighbors, my friends, everyone I ever knew and loved. And now you beg forgiveness? Look at me. I said, look at me! I'm going to stick your head on an Egan spear.
And Yasuke is seeking her forgiveness and wants to atone for the part that he played in Nobunaga's conquests. But at the same time, he respected Nobunaga and saw him as a close friend, the first person that ever treated him as another equal human being. After Nobunaga's death, he's lost and he wants to serve a new purpose, and decides to follow Naoe in building up the assassins of Japan, which leads to the main theme of the Shadows story. Aside from their own personal journeys, who's the one that pulled the strings of Nobunaga's death, and who is going to fill that power vacuum? If you know Assassin's Creed, you know there's all kinds of conspiracies behind the scenes. The character development is just top notch, and it made me feel the emotional weight of some moments. That's something the last couple of entries in the series didn't do for me very often. There's this young boy, Junjiro, that helps Naoe, and she becomes like a big sister to him, and he teaches her the power of forgiveness, pointing out that Yasuke did many bad things and took away people's fathers. But so did she. So if he's a monster that doesn't deserve to live, then she can't be much better. The moment's heavy, and it shows the care and quality of the game writers. I felt this. Now, from a gameplay perspective, the combat does feel like a mixture of the now traditional RPG Assassin's Creed and the classics, which Mirage brought back. You can swap between Naoe and Yasuke at will once you meet him, but some quests are specifically for him, and some are specifically for her. So it's a nice balance of having to play both characters, and they play totally different from each other. He's much heavier and stronger, he can bash through doors. He's got guns, he's got arrows, heavy weapons. She's faster, she's stealthier, she can assassinate with a hidden blade, hide in bushes and whistle to get guys to come over to her, and then she could put them in the haystack. She's the classic Assassin's Creed gameplay character, and she's armed with several tools like smoke bombs, chimes, kunai, and the world's filled with all kinds of loot from weapons to clothing that's all upgradable and customizable. There's a transmog system, so once you collect a piece of clothing, for example, you can equip a stronger one and make it look visually like any other you've come across. There's nothing here drastically different than what came before, so I'd like to focus more on the new mechanics that were added. I really like the new canon mode. I always like playing these games the way the story was intended, but that's not always been clear. For example, I spent hundreds of hours in Odyssey playing as Alexios. He was the face on the box. He was in all the marketing. So I thought, of course, he's the one you're supposed to be. But then a novel reveals that Cassandra's the canon character, and then Valhalla further reconfirms her as the Eagle Bearer, because she's in it. And then Eivor, same thing as Alexios. He's the face of all the marketing. He spent hundreds of hours playing his story. But then it's canon that historical Eivor was the female version. Shadows addresses the canon version of the story with a canon mode. If you like to keep it off, you can, and that lets you influence the story by making different decisions and choosing different responses in the dialogue. With canon mode, on the other hand, these decisions are all never given to you and the story just plays out the way the writers intended it to. Having both options available for players is an outstanding choice, and it shows that they've been listening to feedback and they've been learning from previous games. There's also a guided mode, which turning it on does affect trophies. I think it's better off anyways. It basically tells you where to go exactly for every single objective. If there's an enemy you have to kill but you don't know their identity, it'll just tell you where to go. It's much more fun and immersive with guided mode off. It borrows elements from Assassin's Creed Mirage where you don't have all the answers right away. It requires a little bit of investigation to uncover your targets, and you can do that in different ways. You also have these scouts that you can send out into the world map that can uncover the information for you. Mirage is probably the most important game when it comes to Shadows, which surprised me. It borrows heavily from elements that Mirage introduced. Even the objective screen is laid out and organized in the same structure with different mission groups organized visually versus an objective screen just filled with text you have to read. It's so much better, it works really well, and it should remain the standard of the series moving forward. Another influence of Mirage, which I absolutely ate up, was all the history lessons. Yes, I said this is not a history lesson, it's a video game, but it is really cool when you're wandering around the world, climbing a temple, and then you scan a little glowing particle, and it adds an entry into your database filled with real-life history of this location or the objects surrounding it. With real images and historical paintings, it's really cool. Another new aspect of Shadows that at first I didn't care for was the base building aspect. In Valhalla, your village, you can upgrade it with supplies. Shadows takes this 10,000 steps forward into a full-blown base building mechanic. Now, I was never a huge fan of these sort of things in games before, like in Metal Gear. I don't like building Mother Base. I don't want to mess with all that. I just want to go kill guys. But let me tell you, in Shadows, I spent hours upon hours unlocking different kinds of bushes and trees and building styles and walls for my hideout. It's an absolute waste of time, but I was hooked. It's really easy to use and it's super addicting, but you're not forced to use it. If you just want to buy the forge in there for your weapon upgrades and call it a day, you can. Me, I obsessively bought, built, and organized little pathways connecting all my different buildings together. I built a nice gravel road leading to my forge with lanterns on each side coming down that light up at night, by the way, and a bamboo fence surrounding my property. There's a trail with a beautiful tree on the end and a bench in the front. It's beautiful, and it's mine. And when you exit the editor mode, it's all there in the game world for you to walk around and explore. Try it. I bet you'll become as hooked as I did. And I'm not a huge graphics person. I don't think that graphics make a game. They're not the most important factor. But Shadows is the best looking Assassin's Creed game. Mind you, I am playing on a PS5 Pro too. The environment's bright and colorful, the seasons change gradually, or you can manually change the season. Some areas are easier to traverse in the winter, where there's less shrubbery in the way of your path, and more snow cover, versus being in that same area during the summer. The weather system could go from a nice sunny day to an evening covered in a dark thunderstorm that's great for sneaking around and killing your targets. The balancing of the game is another aspect improved from previous entries. I remember Odyssey having this issue, where I would travel to some areas and get my ass handed to me by over-leveled enemies hunting me, and then I'd have to go grind a little bit like Final Fantasy. In Shadows, the difficulty never felt unbalanced unless I went out of my way purposely to go to an area with a way higher level suggestion that's clearly labeled on the map. The map's laid out the areas marked by certain levels in a way that you know where you should travel next, and it all flows very naturally. It's organized in a manner of, this is how you should follow the story. If you don't want to, you don't have to. You can go to a way higher level and jump further into the story and struggle if you choose to. But it's better to explore the world organized by the level suggestions. So that's all the Assassin's Creed Shadows praise. What about its shortcomings? One of them I didn't care for was that it took way too long in the story to get Yasuke into its main events. For the first 10 hours or so, mind you, I did do some side stuff and explore a bit, so maybe let's call it the first 5 hours. In that time frame, I was asking myself, when the hell does Yasuke show up? Once he does make his big introduction, he becomes a natural part of the story. But at first, it felt way more Naue focused than being evenly distributed among both main characters. Even the main story feels very much like her story, and he's just kind of along for the ride. I am hoping that as I progress even deeper into the second half of the game, that his personal journey does become more important versus being an addition to her story. And the modern day segments I think are handled really well in this game. They're not as interruptive as they were in the others like Valhalla. I remember I'd be playing like 8 hours, be really invested in the storyline of the past. Then the game just pulls me out and forces me into a much less interesting modern day segment that I have to go through. Don't get me wrong, the modern day portion in Shadows is interesting, but I just don't feel the modern day story's necessary for much longer. I've been feeling that way for a couple of games now. I hope in future installments, they just kind of wrap it up and let us play in the past without any explanation. In Mirage, there was absolutely no modern day story. It just threw us into the past in Baghdad and left us there. I like that a lot. Let's just do that from now on. There's a million more things I'd love to say about Shadows, but this review covers my overall opinion on how I feel about the game. I'm really glad it turned out the way it did. I'm glad it was delayed to polish it as much as possible. The best Assassin's Creed since Black Flag and Origins. I highly recommend audiences check it out and ignore all the online discourse. Don't just agree with me. Don't just agree with other creators. Check it out for yourself and form your own opinions. Couldn't be any easier. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to click on my link in the description for some great deals with Into the AM clothing. That's the review. I'll catch you guys next time.